Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm Mariangela Maguire, and I'm here today with my guest, Kate Leibfried. And Kate is an author, editor, book writing coach, the founder of ClickClack Writing. She's worked with over 40 book projects and has helped dozens of aspiring authors articulate their ideas through writing. Though she has assisted writers in writing projects of all genres, she specializes in memoir and biography, business books, and children's literature. And in her other life, Kate writes under the pen name Kate Bitters, and I'm eager to ask how you chose that pen name, of course. She's published 2 novels, 2 children's books, several stories. She also has a wonderful blog that I've been reading recently. And when she's not writing, she can be found riding her bike and walking her rescue dog, who may or may not join us today. Or she's immersed in a book, and I'm eager to find out what she's been reading lately. And Kate, first of all, thank you for joining me today. I'm so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So I asked you to hear because, the purpose of this show is to help people on their mindfulness journey. And mindfulness is being present to the moment without judgment. And I'm here to help people do that because I think that the more mindful we are, the more peace we have in our lives, and the more peace we can bring into the world around us, which I think at this particular moment in history, all of us are aware of how important that is to be a source of peace. So, but writing, I think, is an opportunity for people to sort of use writing as a mindfulness practice. And the reason I'm so excited to be talking to you about this is I see this in your blogs. I see this as really something that you as a writing coach and teacher in particular are really thinking about is how does writing help us not just produce good writing, but produce peace in our hearts? So thanks for being here again. And maybe you'd start by telling us, writing, I think a lot of people would be intimidated by the idea that you could just say, you know what, I'm a writer, but you are a writer. How did this all come about? How did you develop all of these practices around writing, especially and business opportunities around it?
Yes. Well, first of all, it really felt like a stretch at first to say I am a writer.
Did
It's
it?
something that you don't grow up thinking. I mean, maybe maybe some people do, but I didn't really think I would ever say I am a writer with the confidence that I say now, because at first it sounded fake. It sounded pretentious, but it's, anyone can be a writer. It's something that you really grow into. And I I've kind of always been a writer, and ever since I was little, I would write stories for my mom and dad. My grandmother really encouraged my writing. She was a good Catholic mother of 6, but she was also a teacher, and um, she had tried to get her degree at St. Catherine's University and was unable to do so because of World War II. So she really put a lot of faith in me and my education and my writing. And she always loved words and kind of helped instill a love of words in me. But even so, I didn't always know that I was going to be a writer. I went to college and studied communications, particularly media communications. And I was kind of on that path, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my communications major. I had an internship at Rake magazine, which no longer around, but they were an arts and culture magazine. And the month that my feature story was supposed to be printed was the month that they went out of print.
Oh my gosh, that must have been devastating.
It was. And I had spent all this time on the story. And I thought, well, the writing is on the wall. I'm never going to be a writer. And
Right.
just, and to date myself, this was the Great Recession when I graduated in
Oh,
2008.
yes.
So I kind of just swooped up any job that I could get at that point,
Mm-hmm.
which was not a writing job.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Portland, Oregon, and became an assistant director of a nonprofit.
Okay.
Um, and there was a little bit of writing involved, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I kind of veered off of the writing path for a while. I eventually moved back to Minnesota, worked a variety of jobs that you might call menial jobs, and kind of lost sight of writing for a while. I did always journal, and I did
Mm-hmm.
always write kind of freestyle poetry and some
Mm-hmm.
short stories, but I wasn't terribly serious about it then. But I hit a wall, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to do some kind of self-discovery,
Mm-hmm.
self-evaluation work.
Mm-hmm.
And what came out of that work was the realization that no, this isn't what I want to be doing. I want to be writing. And from there, I began freelance writing. I picked up a few clients. I impulsively quit my job.
Wow, I love that. What a leap of
Well,
faith.
yeah, and I did work a side job for a while as a
Mm-hmm.
server for a couple
Mm-hmm.
of years. But after only 2 years, I was able to quit my serving job
Mm-hmm.
and just become a full-time freelance writer. Um, at first working on smaller projects such as, actually this is another evolution, kind of
Mm-hmm.
evolving as far as what type of writing I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed. um, I started out with smaller projects, blog posts and newsletters, and moved into the area I am in now, which is ghostwriting and editing and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I really prefer those areas, and that was kind of an evolution to learning my preferences
Mm-hmm.
for writing.
I'm really struck by a couple of things in your story. One is someone who believed in you at a very young age and who believed in words and the power of words and language, and how even when you moved away from writing, that must have still fed part of your sense of self. It was maybe languishing, but when you hit that wall, I think sometimes when we hit a wall in life, we just retreat back into what is seems safe and familiar. But you took a leap. What incredible faith in yourself that shows. I think that's very powerful, and it was a risk, and to take those kinds of risks, I just think that's an important for people to see that it wasn't easy, and it wasn't just that you worked hard, but at a certain point you had to take a big risk to get where you wanted to be, or
Yeah,
to move into this place where you were writing full time.
yeah, I think, I mean, that's so true. It felt like a risk, and it felt like, is my parachute going to open or not?
Right.
But one thing that happened that I enjoy telling people about is that when I put aside kind of the things I didn't want to be doing and
Mhm.
opened myself to writing and the things I did want to be doing, opportunities just flowed in.
Isn't
It
that
was
interesting?
incredible.
Hmm.
Um, and part of that perhaps is because I had more time. I was able to
Sure.
seek out those opportunities, but part
Hmm.
of it, I think, was just being open and
Hmm.
um, saying, "Here I am. I'm ready to write, and
Hmm.
come
Yeah.
get me." So,
Yeah, and your energy flow was able to flow in that direction. And I mean, I think mindfulness people would say that makes perfect sense that happened because you did have the time, but also you probably were noticing things you'd seen before, but you noticed them in a completely different way now. That's
yeah.
fantastic. Hmm.
Yeah.
So how did ClickClack come about then?
Sure. ClickClack Writing. So that's the name of my company,
Hmm.
and I found myself at a point where I had too much work,
Okay.
which is a good
Wow.
problem to have.
Yes.
People always remind me of that. That's
Mhm.
a good problem to have. Um, but I was juggling something like 6 or 7 different, blogs, and
Oh.
they were weekly or monthly blog posts for 6 or 7 different companies,
Mhm.
and, newsletters, and I was also working on my own book, and I was also working on a book for a business, so I had
Okay.
just
Wow.
gobs of of things, on my plate. So, it was out of necessity that
Mhm.
ClickClack Writing was born. Um, I, I'm a part of several different writing groups in the Twin Cities
Okay.
area, and I also just, well, through the writing groups and through just life, I have met some talented people
Mhm.
and tapped into those talented people and asked if they would be interested in sharing some of this work. So out of that, I began hiring contractors,
Mhm.
um, and my uh, she's not even really a contractor anymore. She's almost a business partner.
Mhm.
Jessica Stazak Abbott's. She and I really began to form ClickClack Writing. Well,
Okay.
I formed it, and she came on board and just was instrumental in bringing it to the next level.
Mhm.
So she and I began teaching community ed classes on writing.
Okay.
We developed a coaching uh,
Mhm.
system, parameters for coaching,
Mhm.
and we both began coaching people on writing their own stories
Mhm.
because not everyone wants to hire a ghostwriter. Some
Right.
people want to write their own story, and ghostwriting is expensive, and not
Right.
everyone wants to spring for a ghostwriter. So, there are a lot of reasons why someone would take a crack at their own book.
Sure.
So we we did a lot of research. We combed through forums and
Mhm.
kind of found what we called pain points,
Mhm.
um, things that people brought up that were like, well, I would like to write, I would like
But
to do this,
yes.
but
Mhm.
I'd like to write, but, and so we looked at the buts and we figured out how to coach based on off of those pain points.
That is so smart. I love that level of really focusing on what was real for people. And so we're going to take a break, but when we come back, I think we're going to kind of pick up right where we left off because I'm interested in, I think we're going to talk about how writing can be a kind of a restorative mindfulness practice, but also what gets in people's way. Why do people stop themselves? What are kind of those pain points about writing? So I hope you'll join us after the break. I'm here with Kate Leibfried, and we're talking about writing and mindfulness. And you're listening to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. We'll be Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm here today with Kate Leibfried, and Kate is a writer, an editor, a writing coach. She has a business called ClickClack Writing, where she works both as a coach and a ghostwriter. I'm so impressed with just there's no aspect of writing, it seems to me, that you aren't involved in or haven't been involved in at some point, including you've written a children's book in Spanish or in Spanish and English to help kids learn the language. Is that
Yes,
right?
yep, that's true. I actually wrote it for my friend Kati and her little boy Rafael,
Okay.
um, a friend of mine who I met in Ecuador when I was
Okay.
studying there. And the book is called Como se llama tu llama, which is kind of it's a bit of a play on words, but it
Right?
means what is the name of your llama?
Right.
And it's a little poem in Spanish.
It's very sweet. And I love the illustrations too that I saw today.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
Kate, we've been talking about writing, and one of the things that you figured out when you were putting your business together was what sort of gets in people's way, what stops them from writing. And I think that's very important because I want you to talk about how you see writing as a way for people to either manage grief. I know you've written about that, or in this time of COVID, you had a wonderful blog post about here's something you might do is kind of free
Mm.
writing. But at the same time, you can encourage people to do that. I want you to talk about the benefits of that, but people also stop themselves. So how do you talk to people about to encourage it and also to help them get over their anxieties about it?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So people put up a lot of blocks when it comes to writing,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the more common ones that I hear are I'm I'm no good.
Mm-hmm.
I can't write. Um, Another common one I hear is I don't know where to begin.
Mm.
Um, and that often comes up when people are working on or want to work on a larger project.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems so daunting to
Right.
tackle a novel or to tackle a memoir or a business
Mm-hmm.
book. So where do I begin? Um, Another thing people get hung up on is just self-editing and being really hard on themselves, really particular. Um, so they'll write a paragraph or two and they'll look at it and they'll go no 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 and they'll erase it. And one of the ways that I help people get over that particular block is free writing or
Okay.
writing off of prompts. And free writing is just a way to kind of loosen your mind and get your writing juices flowing without judgment.
Mm.
So
Really a
I always
mindfulness practice. It really is. Yeah.
it is, yeah,
Yeah.
it actually is. It
Mm-hmm.
fits the definition perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
um, because when you free write, you just go. You don't look back. You just
Mm-hmm.
it's a very stream of consciousness. Um, it also is great for processing emotions, processing grief, or processing other more positive emotions, joy and
Mm-hmm.
or transitions. But it also can just help people get unstuck. So if they are struggling with a particular part of their book, they might just try free writing for a while, which involves, um, well, for me, it involves pen and paper, good old
Okay.
fashioned pen
Ah.
and paper,
Uh-huh.
um, and a timer, and just going for it. You can also use prompts if you free write. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just a word or a phrase that helps you anchor yourself and
Mm-hmm.
get going. Um, so the prompt might be something like a walk on the beach or fall leaves or cup of coffee, anything like that. And you
Mm-hmm.
just take that prompt and run with it. Um, the reason I encourage pen and paper is because it lets you flow better, in my opinion, than a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not it's not so easy to erase. So
Oh, right.
yeah.
Sure.
So when you're on your laptop, you can be writing along and then look back and go, oh, that's not so great, and you go
Yeah.
back and erase it.
Mm-hmm.
Harder to do with pen and paper.
You can scratch it out, but you might just keep going instead, and you can't actually get
Exactly.
rid of it entirely.
Yeah.
I noticed I liked in the blog that you wrote about writing using writing in a grief situation was your appreciation of the pen and paper itself. That there's a kind of paper you particularly like, and it's so your description was such an embodied experience, right? Where I think sometimes the computer is a little bit more disembodied.
Yes, you're right. I enjoy writing on paper without lines.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, so a sketch pad or something like
Mhm.
that where there are no lines and you can just write in all directions, really.
Do you think people resist even something like free writing because they're so focused on I have to produce something, I have to produce a thing?
Um, yeah, I think so. One of the things that I like to remind people of is that you don't have to share your writing with anyone.
Hmm.
This can be just for you, and that's okay. No
Hmm.
one has to see this. And if you really don't want to read it later, you don't have to. It's
Right.
the purpose for me. The purpose of free writing is to just get unstuck, get the ideas out there, and
Hmm.
don't worry about perfection.
Hmm.
And another kind of form of that
Hmm.
of free writing would be journaling.
Mm-hmm.
So journaling is a practice that could either be kind of a chronicle of the day, or you could have a gratitude journal where
Oh, that's a good
you know,
idea.
talk about what you're grateful for, either in the morning or at night. All of these things just help people get into a writing practice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing too. People, when they think that they're not good writers, well, anyone who plays basketball or chess or anything like that has to practice. And the
Mm-hmm.
same is true with writing. Um, you can't just wish yourself into being a good writer. You have to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And free writing or writing off of prompts can really help with that.
Mm-hmm. I always thought that in school, or that maybe it was, I'm a big reader. And so I've only, you only see edited, polished writing. And so it's hard sometimes to believe that that was ever a mess on a page, right? That
Right.
was ever any different than what I see in the book or what I read on the screen. But, but yeah, revision is everything, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. They do say most of writing is rewriting.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm with my writing groups, I see submissions over and over and over because people are submitting the
Mm-hmm.
sixth or the seventh draft of something,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's just how it is.
And that work really does transform over that time, right?
Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm. So have you ever in your own writing practice and using writing as you're processing things, is sometimes there's a saying in communication studies that speech completes the thought. So once I put something into words, I understand what I'm thinking and feeling. Is writing that way as well? Do you sometimes come to understand yourself differently or better, ever surprised at what comes out of your pen when you're writing?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I'm so happy you brought that up because I was thinking about that today.
Mm-hmm.
How we we tend to not process things in our lives, and writing helps to process emotion and ideas. So now, we with COVID, a lot of us are working at home, and
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of separation between work and home. And then, when we're done with work, we cook dinner, we sit in front of the TV, we do this and that, but we don't take a lot of time to um, process our emotions, process our hopes and dreams and ideas. And I think writing is just an irreplaceable way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that when I'm writing, ideas will come up that I I don't think would have come up any other way.
Oh, okay.
Because it does just create kind of this space, that where it's okay to just generate ideas and
Mm-hmm.
put down whatever is on your mind, especially if you are free writing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm just really surprised by what comes up. If
Are
I'm,
you?
yes, yes, sometimes I go, where did that come from?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And um, I think that writing is really what helps to bring those ideas to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just think that's very exciting. And one of the things I'm thinking about as you're describing this is, so do you really have a practice where you write without purpose? Like so it sounds like you do free writing both just as a way to keep yourself writing and to process things, that writing is a tool in that sense, and that sometimes you might do free writing around a particular project, but a lot of times it is maybe your daily practice even is just write to write. Is that correct?
I do try to write every morning. Sometimes I don't, but I do try to write every morning, and I I do like to warm up with a free write,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially if I'm feeling stuck.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's not something I do every day, but I like to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's invaluable. It really is. So typically, if I'm working on a project, the free write will be centered around that project.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just use an example. So I'm working on a fiction project right now, and I was feeling a little bit stuck about where my character needed to go. And so I just kind of did a free write around different ideas of where she could go to get from point A to point B, how she could get to point B. And it was on paper, it was messy, but in the end, I felt more comfortable writing the actual passage and sitting down and writing a draft. So yeah, that is part of my practice. I wish I were always consistent. I'm not always consistent every day, but I do regularly free write when I'm feeling stuck.
I think that's a really important example. If I think of myself more as a reader than a writer, that a passage that you've written started not a fully formed set of sentences that just came out on the page, but that you described free writing that led to a draft. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, right, the free writing didn't even become the final thing, it became a draft. And I just think that's great reinforcement of this idea of the value of that kind of free writing. Yeah, that's very interesting. So we're going to take another break, and when we come back, I just want to keep having this conversation with you. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the inauguration, because there was an incredible example of amazing writing in Amanda Gorman's poem. So we'd like to talk a little bit about that when we come back. You're listening to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm here with Kate Leibfried, and we'll be back to talk more about writing. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm Mariangela Maguire, and I'm here today with Kate Leibfried. And Kate is a writer. You write novels. You've written children's books. You're a short story writer. You also, though, have a business, ClickClack Writing, Kate, which I think is a great idea for a business in terms of helping people, whether it's through coaching or teaching, ghostwriting. So if people are interested in learning more about Kate's business, I think it's probably at the bottom of the screen, your website. They can go to clickclackwriting.com. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and learn kind of how to get engaged with you in any of the kind of work that you do through ClickClack. But you also, as a writer, you don't use the name Kate Leibfried in your writing. You use Kate Bitters. Can I ask you how you chose that name?
Sure.
Why do you use a pen name?
Yeah, part of the reason for choosing a pen name is because people usually can't pronounce or spell my name.
Right.
That's was one of the impetus for choosing a pen name. And I kind of just wanted to separate my business work and life with my fiction life, and it kind of gives me more freedom to write whatever I'd like through fiction. And how I chose bitters, I knew that I wanted an English word, a word that that people would associate with something else. And I was writing my first novel at the time, and the main character was bitter.
Okay.
Was kind of this bitter older man, and it was about his journey. And I thought about it, and the name resonated with me, and I just went for it.
Okay.
I also checked to see if any other authors were named Kate Bitters, and I also checked to see if the Twitter handle was available, and it was.
It was. Okay. It was a very strategic decision. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, just looking at your smiling face, I can't think of anybody who exudes less bitterness than you.
I have my days. I have my days.
Okay, good. That's great. Well, we've been talking about the power of writing in our lives and the opportunity it presents to us. And do you have any other kind of maybe just little words of wisdom you might want to share before we move on to another topic, that to encourage people to just let themselves write in that unedited way? or to take whatever other kind of
Yeah.
leap into writing that they might want to be taking.
Yeah, I guess to offer something kind of concrete if
Mhm.
somebody's really trying to not only have a writing practice, but perhaps publish something down the
Okay.
road. Um, I think it's important to start with those practices I mentioned, the free writing, writing off of prompts, perhaps taking a writing class, but then to also just try writing a short story.
Okay.
I wouldn't leap right into a novel. You could leap right into a novel,
Sure. Uh-huh.
but just to try to, because to me, writing a short story takes a lot of craft and discipline,
Mhm.
and in a way, it's harder than writing a novel because you
Mhm.
have to just edit it down to its essence. A
Mhm.
novel can be big and sprawling, and you can put a lot of extra stuff in it that isn't
Yes.
necessary.
Hmm.
But if you're restricted to 1,000 words or
Right.
something like that, you really have to pick 1,000 quality words. So
I love it that you put it that way. I am a big fan of John Updike short stories. And I remember as a much younger woman reading some of his stories and thinking, and just that realization, that epiphany of he has chosen each and every word, right? There is that level of precision and control and conciseness. It's really
mhm,
interesting. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Start with a short story. And 1,000 words, is that a good number?
Um, so that's right on the border. Flash fiction is about
Oh,
500 to 1,000
okay.
or 1,500 words. So
Okay.
that's I think that's a good place to start.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
great. So, did you watch the inauguration?
I did. I watched a good chunk of it,
Right.
and
Same
I
here. I
did
didn't see every
see.
minute, but I did see a lot of it. So, did you
Yes,
see the live? Did you see Amanda Gorman's presentation live?
I did. I was lucky enough to see her. Yes.
As a writer, what did you think? What stood out to you?
First of all, it was so profound. I went back and re-watched it just
Yes.
because it's so layered,
Mm-hmm.
layers upon layer of meaning, and not only layers of meaning but layers of language. She
Ah,
is so good with language. I mean, she was using alliteration. She was using these rhyming schemes, and
yes.
she was using language that popped. And I don't have a better way to say it really. But she is a young woman with a command of language,
Mhm.
and um, she was using extended metaphors, just all of
Right.
these things that made you go, wow.
That was, yeah, it was beautiful. I thought I, I was so impressed with the passion of it, and also in terms of the language, there's sometimes with such a plain spoken quality. I mean, it was so conversational, which is almost, I think, never my perception of a poem. And even when she started, found myself thinking, has she started? Right?
Mm-hmm.
But I loved that, and I loved that
Mm-hmm.
about it, because I thought it added to the richness and also the skill. I mean, it was very deft performance. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think part of it too was just her spoken word. She has this cadence that it's it's almost like a song.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the way
Yes.
she was uh, the way she was going through her poem, it felt like a conversation, but also like a song to me.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was both very complex but very accessible too in terms of how
Mm,
of the language. So that I read it again recently, and just it's just amazing.
yeah.
I was really glad, and I liked that Dr. Jill Biden was the one who had recommended her, that she'd seen her speak, and so was I just
Hmm.
liked that another layer of meaning there. So
I didn't realize that.
yeah,
Um, but
I
yeah,
read that
yeah,
somewhere.
she was definitely the star of the show as far as I'm concerned.
And you might be saying you might be biased because you're a writer, but at the
Might
same
be.
time, yeah. It was
Yeah.
excellent. So I wanted to ask you something else sort of related to that. I saw her later when she was interviewed by Anderson Cooper, who was a total fanboy, gushing. It was adorable to see him just almost speechless in her presence. He seemed to enjoy her and was just bowled over by her. And she was talking about her preparation for writing the poem, and she'd read other inaugural poems, she'd read other speeches that had been given like by people like Frederick Douglass. And she also said then, in addition to kind of the historical work, she'd looked at Twitter to see how people were talking. This was particularly after the failed insurrection. She was interested in how people were talking about that on Twitter. And I don't think she quoted anything that she read, but it did give her ideas about how people were using language to describe that situation. So it made me think, and you are young compared to me, so I feel like you are an expert on this. Is there good writing on social media? Or is it all just stream of consciousness, just, blah, blah, just tell you, yeah, is it all junk? Or is there good writing out there?
Um, so that's an interesting question because I kind of think it depends on how you define good.
Okay.
Um, but but okay, so is there important writing on social
Oh,
media?
okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Mhm,
There is
mhm.
important writing on social media that I think people will point to years from now.
Like what?
Say,
Is there something you think of when you say that?
oh, I think of just threads that I see on Twitter that are of the moment.
Okay.
So there has been a big controversy lately in the writing community about the inclusion of trans women,
Mhm.
and J.K. Rowling is a part of that
Right.
conversation.
Mhm.
And I think some of the threads uh, that we see coming out about that
Mm.
are really important
Okay.
because people are tuning in. They're seeing big names either support the inclusion of trans women
Mhm.
or not
Mhm.
support it, and so I think this is a huge topic that people can
Okay.
look back and say, okay, that blew up on social media.
Mhm.
Um, there's also authors who, and I'm this is my world, so I pay attention to authors on social media.
Mhm.
There are authors who have been called out as being racist or sexist or have committed some other kind of writing crime, right? Writing faux pas
Mhm.
um, that people on Twitter have called them out on. Or the musical artist
Mhm.
Sia, she is coming out with a movie that people on Twitter have called out as being ableist,
Okay.
um, and that she employed and kind of cherry picked an actress that she liked who
Oh, yes.
is not autistic and who doesn't have that experience. So anyway, I think there are, and this is kind of going off topic, but I think uh, social media is important as far as what's out there and what's written.
Mhm.
Um, and as far as good writing,
Mhm.
as in quality writing,
Mhm.
I I'm not sure. I think that it's less of a priority for people to craft their tweets or their Facebook posts
Mhm.
eloquently and beautifully, but I think it does exist. It might not be, well, okay, let me put it this way. I think that people choose words carefully sometimes, or not, but some people choose words very carefully on social media. And because of that, they can either gain a lot of support or they can get a lot of backlash for the words that they choose.
Mhm.
Um, so, again, I don't know if that means the writing is good, but it's
Mhm.
powerful.
Mhm.
It has meaning.
Mhm.
Um, so, I don't think social media is just a vacuum of nothing.
Okay. Or of junk even. But I
Yeah.
mean, I really like what you've said, that it does capture the moment in a way that even an essay in a high quality magazine may not capture the moment quite as intensely or as
Mhm.
powerfully as the exchanges that happen on social media. Are there people on social media you particularly follow because of I mean, it's not just the writing, but it's the quality of their ideas as they capture it in, say, Twitter or on Instagram or something?
Um, uh, yeah, off the top of my head, a couple of authors that I follow on social media are N.K. Jemisin.
Mm-hmm.
She is a Hugo Award-winning author, multiple
Uh-huh.
Hugos, and Nnedi Okorafor. She's another author. She's Nigerian American. She's another one. And one more that I really enjoy following is Charlie Jane Anders. She
Mm-hmm.
is a speculative fiction author.
Okay.
Um, Based in San Francisco, but I was lucky enough to meet her at a writing workshop
Oh,
in Minneapolis.
okay. Oh,
So a few that I always tune into.
okay. Great. Some good, those are some good recommendations. So we're going to take our final break. And Kate, when we come back, I hope that you'll tell us what for people who, and I suspect you would say everyone could gain something from a writing practice in terms of processing feelings and experiences. But also, so I'd love for you to give us a couple of things you want to leave us with in terms of that. And also, in addition to people you might be following on Twitter, what's the best couple of books you've read recently? And let us give us some ideas about that. Okay.
All right.
So you're listening to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. We are talking about writing today and how writing is an opportunity to practice mindfulness, to really notice what's happening in our minds, what's happening in our bodies, putting it on paper in order to really, as a process of self-discovery, if nothing else, and to let go of that critic who's always trying to tell us that we don't know how to write. So my guest today in this conversation is Kate Leibfried, and Kate is a writer herself. If you look for her work under the name Kate Bitters, children's books, short stories, novels, we're eager to see what she comes out with next. And also through her work as an editor or writing coach at ClickClackWriting.com. So if you're interested in working with Kate, the best strategy is to reach out through her website, ClickClackWriting.com. So Kate, what do you're a teacher, what do you like to leave people with in terms of encouragement and advice about writing?
Um, yeah. So one of the things that I like to tell people, especially at the end of my community ed classes, is to pay attention, and that's kind of an unusual tip um, for a writer. But one of the reason I give that tip, pay attention, is because the best writing is really immersive.
Mm,
And if you're listening to the sounds that surround you, if you're, pay attention to the smells, the sights, the colors, all of that, your writing will be more vivid and more alive. But and that's really if you're trying to be a writer and get
okay.
something published. Um, but as far as just using it as a practice,
Hmm.
I just encourage people to write on a regular schedule, write every day, and to do it without judgment,
Okay.
and to use pen and paper.
And to use pen and
those are
paper.
those are the
Well,
main.
yeah, I think that's such an important, and I think, sometimes when I encourage people with my clients or on this show to incorporate mindfulness practices into our lives, people tend to, their first yes, but is, I don't have time.
Mm.
So what's enough time to do a free write? Do I need an hour?
No, if you have even 5 or 10 minutes, you could do a free write. I
Okay.
It would be nice to have an hour, but if you have half an hour, that's
Mhm.
more than enough, more than enough time. And if you have a short attention span, which a lot of us do,
Right?
you can break up that time into 5 or 10 minute chunks.
Oh,
Set
that's
a
a good idea.
timer,
Hmm.
just write for 5 or 10 minutes, whatever you feel like. And when
Hmm.
the timer goes off, you take a short break,
Hmm.
you pick another writing prompt, or you just start over again.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that strategy works for a lot of people.
Okay. I'm often encouraging people to take mindfulness practices in chunks because small chunks like that they tend to think that I need an hour to sit and meditate. Nope. I can just bring my full attention, my full awareness to the moment without judgment while I'm making the bed, right? Or while I sit down to write. I don't have to add more stuff to my day. I can see what's already in my day and take things in small spaces, small chunks of time. And there's real value in that in terms of quieting our minds and bringing our attention to the moment. So, okay, writer, what have you been reading lately that's really stood out to you that you would encourage people to take a look at?
Yes, it's a great question. This past year, I've been trying to average a book a week, so I
Wow.
have read quite a bit this past year. Um, so my favorite historical fiction novel that I read this past year was Pachinko, and it's by Min Din Lee is the author.
Okay.
And then, so that it covers, I would call it a family saga. It covers
Okay.
a lot of space and time following one Korean family.
Okay.
And then one of the best novellas that I read was Prosper's Demon.
Okay.
And that is a quick read. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of mouthy. It's just a fun one. And let's see, as far as um, mythological fantasy, one of the best reads of the year for me last year was Gods of Jade and Shadow, and that's by Sylvia Moreno Garcia,
Hmm.
and it follows a young woman who basically is tied to a god of Xibalba, the underworld.
Oh, okay.
So the Mayan underworld, and then
Okay.
her journey. So those are a few that I would definitely recommend.
You read very widely. Do you have a favorite genre? Or
I read a lot of speculative fiction,
Mhm.
so sci-fi fantasy, a lot of fantasy, but I also love literary fiction and historical fiction too.
Okay, okay. And your novels, one is a kind of a dystopian
Hmm.
novel. Is that the word you would use?
Yes, yes, I would.
Okay.
10,000 Lines is dystopian, and then Elmer Left is more literary fiction.
Okay, all right. And what are you working on now?
Great question. Right now, I am working on a kind of near future dystopia meets mining lore.
Really?
So,
Like mining, digging
yeah,
in the ground lore?
but yes, there is
Really?
a lot of lore around mining, and
Okay.
I just kind of got into that. And so, mining lore meets
In
future
the
kind of,
future.
and it's set in like a second world Eastern Europe.
Okay.
So that's what I'm working on right now.
So will you go to Eastern Europe? Have you been to Eastern Europe? How do you get that atmosphere?
I have been to Easter. I've been, yes, I've been to
Okay.
Bulgaria,
Okay.
but my roots are from Eastern
Ah,
Europe.
okay.
Part of my roots. I'm
Yeah.
a bit of a mutt, but um, both on my mom and my dad's side, I have
Okay.
some Eastern European roots. So
Okay.
I'm kind of,
Drawing on that a little bit.
yes, I am.
Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, that's wonderful. Kate, I have really loved having you here on the show today. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I hope people really hear the letting yourself write without judgment and finding that opportunity to come in, whether it's processing grief, healing some feelings, noticing, finding out what's going on in your own mind through writing. I think you've really been a wonderful encouragement and inspiration to us. So thank you for being here.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And if you want to get in touch with Kate, you can do that at clickclackwriting.com. And my guest next week, I have two guests, Aaron Turner Johnson and Matt Tuttle. And I think it's actually Erin Johnson Turner, sorry about that, and Matt Tuttle. Erin's an attorney in Minneapolis, and she is transforming the way the law is being practiced. And one of the ways is that her clients who are seeking a divorce meet with a life coach, and that's where Matt comes in. He's going to come and talk to us about that experience. So the work that they're doing to really change the client-attorney relationship. I think it's really powerful and exciting work that she's doing. So until next week, I hope that you will be kind to yourself, be curious about what's going on in your mind, and I hope you'll join us next week on Nothing But Now on Transformation Talk Radio. You've been listening to Nothing But Now, Mindful Living with Dr. Mariangela Maguire on Transformation Talk Radio. Join me next time as we continue to practice mindfulness and challenge ourselves to change. If you'd like to find out more about my work or contact me, please go to my website, maguirelifecoach.com. That's maguirelifecoach.com. See you next time.
The music for Nothing But Now was created by Salt Theory.